Alive or dead, he had no rival but Marlowe. Today we're putting the spotlight on Christopher Marlowe, Shakespeare's rival, and his play, The Jew of Malta. Along the way, I'll be comparing its central character, Barabas, with Shakespeare's Shylock. Hi, it's Nicole from A Day of Small Things. During Shakespeare 2025, I talked about Shakespeare and Marlowe and their works on my channel for the first time, comparing Richard II by Shakespeare and Edward II by Marlowe. Shakespeare and Marlowe had an intriguing relationship in their theatre career. Quoting one of my favourite authors and Shakespeare scholars, Jonathan Bate, Shakespeare, I suggest, only became Shakespeare because of the death of Marlowe. It took me a while to realize this, but Shakespeare wasn't creating in a vacuum. He wasn't inventing everything from scratch. Most of his plots and characters actually come from older stories, history, and existing traditions. If you heard of the phrase "steal like an artist," few artists steal better than Shakespeare. What makes him extraordinary is what he does with this material. He takes familiar material and turns it into unforgettable heroes and villains, comedies and tragedies that still resonate today, and those iconic soliloquies everyone remembers. And that brilliance, it comes from a mix of things. His grammar school training, definitely, but also his constant dialogue with the other playwrights of his time. And among all contemporary colleagues and competitors, quoting Jonathan Bate again, alive or dead, he had no rival but Marlowe. The Merchant of Venice was written a few years later than The Jew of Malta, and almost certainly was Shakespeare's response to Marlowe. That's why if I study The Merchant of Venice, I can't not read The Jew of Malta as context. I like to think Shakespeare's plays and the lesser-known works of his contemporaries as stars and planets. They are caught in the same orbit, the universe of Renaissance theatre. They pull and push against each other. They echo, challenge, praise, and very often mock each other. And when you see them that way, no play stands alone. Each one gains meaning from the others, all of them moving, colliding, and competing for space. If you are interested in the historical background of the two playwrights, I have shared a little in this video last year when I compared Richard II and Edward II. I won't repeat myself. Let's go straight to The Jew of Malta. The play starts with a prologue by a character called Machiavelli, who in real life was an Italian writer, political thinker, and diplomat from the Renaissance period. He gives advice to rulers on how to gain and keep power. A ruler must be practical and strategic, not just moral. It's better to be feared than loved if you can't be both. Leaders may sometimes need to be ruthless or deceptive to stay in power. Machiavelli died about 60 years before Marlowe wrote this play. Having him to give the opening soliloquy, it sets the tone for the play's themes of deception and ambition. We meet our central character Barabas immediately, according to the stage direction, in his counting house with heaps of gold before him. He is a wealthy Jewish merchant who has ships trading spice and silk all over the world. Here we see the first difference between Barabas and Shylock. Barabas is portrayed as mostly making money by investment and trade instead of collecting interest from money lending. Although they make money in different ways, they see money in exactly the same term. Money is blessing, and they share that understanding within the Old Testament framework. Thus throws our fortune in by land and sea, and thus are we on every side enriched. These are the blessings promised to the Jews, and herein was old Abraham's happiness. What more may heaven do for earthly man than thus to pour out plenty in their laps, ripping the boughs of the earth for them, making the seas their servants, and the winds to drive their substance with successful blasts. In the same vein, after Shylock tells the story of how Jacob gets rich through deception in Genesis, he says this was a way to thrive, and he was blessed, and thrift is blessing if men steal it not. They also share the same sentiment towards Christians who live according to Christian principles and do not take every advantage for financial gain. Barabas talks in general, haply some hapless man has conscience, and for his conscience lives in beggary. They say we are a scattered nation. I cannot tell, but we have scumbled up more wealth by far than those that brag of faith. He names a list of Jews in Europe, adding myself in Malta, some in Italy, many in France, and wealthy everyone, I, wealthier far than any Christian. And Shylock comments on Antonio specifically. I hate him for he is a Christian, but more for that in low simplicity he lends out money gratis and brings down the rate of usance here with us in Venice. At the beginning of the Jew of Malta, the son of the Turkish Empire Calimath and his army sailed to Malta to collect their 10 years tribute that remains unpaid. The governor of Malta asks for a month to make the collection. When the request is granted, the governor immediately turns to the Jews in Malta for money. First, the tribute money of the Turks shall all be levied amongst the Jews, and each of them to pay 1/2 of his estate. Secondly, he that denies to pay shall straight become a Christian. Lastly, he that denies this shall absolutely lose all he has. This decree sounds remarkably like the outcome of the court scene in The Merchant of Venice. Shylock loses half of his goods and is commanded to presently become a Christian in order to live. At the end of this conference with the governor of Malta, Barabas loses all his money. His house is turned into a convent. As we saw in this video, Jews in England were exploited by the king and taxed heavily to raise money for wars during the medieval period. What Marlowe depicts here is probably not purely fictional. Barabas has a daughter called Abigail, just like Shylock has a daughter called Jessica. In order to retrieve the hidden gold in their house, which is now a nunnery, Barabas orders Abigail to lie to the abbess that she wants to become a nun. They manage to smuggle bags of gold out of the convent at night. Barabas exclaims in ecstasy, "Oh girl, oh gold," which reminds me of Shylock's cry of "My ducat, my daughter." The scene switches to the governor of Malta after the Turkish prince, a vice admiral of Catholic Spain, arrives with a shipload of recent captives who he wants to sell as slaves in Malta. The governor is hesitant to give permission because some of the slaves are Turks and it would anger the Turkish emperor. But the admiral persuades the governor to join force with Spain and fight against the Turks. The governor agrees. One of the slaves is called Ithamor. Barabas bought him to be his partner in crime. Abigail, who has left the convent by this point, has 2 admirers, Matthias, who she loves, and Don Lodovic, the governor's son. Barabas promises her to both of them and commands her to flirt with Don Ludovic against her will. Both young men, in jealousy and hatred, kill each other in a duel. As a result, Abigail converts to Christianity and becomes a nun again. Oh, unhappy day, false, credulous, inconstant Abigail. But let them go, and Ithamore, from hence ne'er shall she grieve me more with her disgrace, ne'er shall she live to inherit aught of mine, be blessed of me, nor come within my gates, but perish underneath my bitter curse, like Cain by Adam for his brother's death. He's not joking when he wishes her to perish underneath his bitter curse. He administers the curse with his own hands and poisons her with all the nuns in the convent with a pot of rice porridge. Before Abigail dies, she reveals the truth about the young man's death to a friar. Two friars confront Barabas of his crime but are dissuaded, or more accurately distracted, by his promises of wealth. Barabas uses the same tactics as he did with the two young men, promising his money to both religious houses and causing jealousy between the two friars. Barabas and Ithamore kill one friar in his sleep and frame the crime on the other, causing the latter being executed publicly. So by now, Barabas has killed the two young men, Matthias and Ludovic, his own daughter, numerous hapless nuns, and two friars. Despite being extremely busy with all this murder, Ithamore surprises me by developing yet another plotline where he falls in love with a prostitute. He also surprises me by choosing love over money. He betrays his master Barabas and abandons the possibility of inheriting all his wealth in favor of rolling in his lover's laps. Ithamore also confesses all the crimes he has done with his master, but alas, Ithamore and his lover are poisoned by Barabas too. The governor, meanwhile, hasn't been sitting idly. Malta declares war with the Turks. While the governor is busy preparing for the impending war, Ithamore and the prostitute burst into his house and uncover everything about his son, Don Ludovic, and other crimes committed by Barabas. The poison works its effect. Ithamore and his lover die, but so does Barabas, which is very strange. The unsuspecting governor throws all the bodies over the city wall and leaves it at that. Except Barabas has faked his death, of course, by drinking the same sleepy drink that Juliet has. He wakes up, dusts his clothes, and defects straight away to the Turks, who are besieging the city. I'll be revenged on this accursed town, for by my means Calymath shall enter in. I'll help to slay their children and their wives, to fire the churches, pull their houses down, take my goods too, and seize upon my land. I hope to see the governor a slave, and rowing in a galley, whipped to death. The city is captured, and the governor is handed over to Barabas, who is now appointed by the Turks as the new governor. I thought Barabas would now execute his revenge. It was the governor who confiscated all his wealth and house at the beginning. He can now take the governor's life, as he did to so many by this point. But strangely, Barabas defects once again and makes a bargain with the governor. If the governor raises a large enough sum of money for Barabas, Barabas will eliminate the Turk officials and soldiers for Malta. He's playing the same game again to offer promises to both and let them finish off each other while he watches and profits. However, at the very end, in a twist, I guess to serve poetic justice, Barabas is killed and the invading Turkish army is annihilated. The Christians in Malta seize the victory, saying, "Let due praise be given, neither to fate nor fortune, but to heaven." The end. So what do you think about the plot and the characters, especially Barabas? As I said earlier, this is the second time I've read Marlowe and Shakespeare side by side. It reinforces my impression that Marlowe's characters tend to be more black and white, and his plots involve more senseless murder and violence. In this respect, it reminds me of Shakespeare's early play Titus Andronicus, where the stage is nearly overrun with dead bodies by the end. I wonder if Marlowe hadn't died so young, might his temperament have evolved, and would his stories become more gentle and nuanced? What do you think? That's all for today. Thank you for watching. I will see you in my next one.